me get straight into this lesson. So I'm gonna get into two videos going into this devil, Esau Edom, the so-called white man's pseudoscience, and going into the tiny tops. But I think I'm gonna have to do a lesson just going into this second video that I'm gonna get into. But these devils, they lied about the oil supply. So what I mean, they lied to you how oil is formed. I'm gonna show you. So before I play this video, let's go here. And that's that pseudoscience of these devils, which they actually push false information as facts. It says crude oil is a fossil fuel. This is what we was taught in school, of this folly. Created naturally over millions of years from buried remains of microscopic marine plants and animals. And the earth is not millions of years old. That's a lie. The earth is not billions of years old. All has been made up. So they saying all came from microscopic marine plants and animals, such as plankton and algae, which this is all nothing but a lie. I'm gonna get into this video, but this stuff you ain't never been told. You never will be told. Give me 1 second. So I'm gonna get into this video, like I said, to go into this big myth, right? These devils use these pseudoscience, they education system to push propaganda and lies. Check this out.
Petroleum, because they were beginning to make motors and needed...
Salakia. 1 second.
Petroleum, because they were beginning to make motors and needed on axles of wheels on railroad trains and all that sort of thing. Then oil went from just a lubricant to a fuel, and it made it valuable. And Rockefeller happened to be the smartest man in the business at the time. So in order to get the price up, they hit on the idea that they would have to make it appear to be scarce. In 1892, there was a convention in Geneva of scientists to determine what organic substances are. Well, the definition of organic is a substance with hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. Rockefeller took advantage of sending some scientists over who said petroleum is hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. They defined oil as the residue from formerly living matter. Well, that makes it a fossil fuel. And another thing we should know is that there has never been a fossil, a real fossil, found below 16,000 feet. We mine oil, or we drill for oil at 30,000.
Did you hear this? This is a very important fact being established. Let's go here. I think I'm gonna do this second video another day, because there's so much to unpack in this first video, because this video gonna have other clips in it. 1 Timothy 6:20. So everything you've been taught, we not just saying that you've been taught is a lie. It's not nothing that we just making up when we say this. This is the truth. Most of the things that you've been taught in this world is deception. It's either a lie or either it's a half truth. Which when you say a half truth, that's a lie. 1 Timothy 6:20, O Timothy, keep that which is committed to thy trust, avoiding profane and vain babblings. And that's what Jake do. Jake likes to psychobabble what they think they know. It's just folly, really. It says in oppositions of science falsely so-called. So this is that pseudo science that they gave you with this narrative of how oil is created. And they had to make it scarce. They had to sell that concept of scarcity, right, so they can control the market. So everything is witchcraft. So this is actually taught in all the academia about this lie. This is one of the biggest lies that's ever been taught for as resources. So, and I saw some capacity that oil can renew itself. Now I have to do more research on that, but I saw a documentary that was breaking that information down. So oil is not scarce. right? They had this fake crisis was in the 1970s. Matter of fact, let me get that information right here. So it says the 1970s energy crisis refers to the two major oil shocks, primarily in the 1973 OPEC embargo and the 1979 Iranian revolution. Ain't that something? The same thing is happening again. Well, they not closing the pumps, and they're not saying it's a shortage, but it's with the so-called Iranians, which are the Persians. It says which caused several fuel shortages, price spikes, and economic turmoil. So this is the Tiny Tops was behind all this back then, like they behind this today. Read in between the lines. So go back here. Remember, all is not scarce. 1 second. And again, going back into that documentary I saw, Lord willing, I can find it when they went into that all is renewable. Now, what to capacity, I don't know. I have to do more research and go into that. But it wasn't, all is not what we was taught. You know, they make a lot of byproducts from all as well. All is very abundant. But they sold you the scarcity thing, and that's why they pushing the electric, all these smart cities, because it's going back into the MOTB, right? Full control. So they're using these different agendas to bait you in to this full technocracy system. So get more into this.
Because they were beginning to make motors and needed on axles of wheels on railroad trains and all that sort of thing. Then oil went from just a lubricant to a fuel, and it made it valuable. And Rockefeller happened to be the smartest man in the business at the time. So in order to get the price up, they hit on the idea that they would have to make it appear to be scarce. In 1892, there was a convention in Geneva of scientists to determine what organic substances are. Well, the definition of organic is a substance with hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. Rockefeller took advantage of sending some scientists over who said oil, petroleum, is hydrogen, oxygen, and carbon. They defined oil as the residue from formerly living matter. Well, that makes it a fossil fuel. And another thing we should know is that there has never been a fossil, a real fossil found below 16,000 feet. We mine oil, or we drill for oil at 30,000, 33,000, 28,000 every day of the week. So right there, we rule it out that it isn't fossil fuel. It's called fossil fuel for the minds of the public to feel that it is an asset that is running out, being depleted. We talk about depletion allowance, which is a lot of, and actually, if you know the world's oil supply, you know that it is not going to run out for an awfully long time. It is the second most prevalent liquid on Earth.
You heard that? And like I said, I have to find that documentary that all renews it's a renewable resource, but you wasn't taught that. So that's why people think it's a conspiracy theory or it's a lie when we say it, because they mind can't fathom or understand that what they've been taught is a lie. And if I'm not mistaken, all is a renewable resource, but I'm not sure to what capacity. But you haven't been taught that. You've been taught that, it's scarcity, right? Now, I know, it is some oil wells that run dry or whatever, but again, things ain't what things are not what we've been taught, right? So we was taught this nonsense about fossil fuels. That makes no logical sense. Let's keep cooking.
The impact of a jet. From what I understand, the outer skeleton of the building. The outer columns was like a fishnet, and you had these inner core columns, which was substantial, thick steel beams to withstand 4 or 5 times what the loads were. The engineers always over-design a building. No steel frame building has ever collapsed before or since 9/11. So that should say something right there. And it said that Building 7, it was a progressive collapse, that it was caused by fire. But progressive collapse, unlike the Twin Towers, the Twin Towers collapse from the top down. That's a progressive collapse, floor by floor by floor. But if you look at the videos of Building 7 collapsing, it collapses uniformly. It's collapsing from the bottom. The building stays intact all the way to the bottom of the ground, and you could see the sides caving in on it. For a building to collapse uniformly, which the videos show, all the load-bearing columns would have had to have failed simultaneously. Now, fire doesn't act like that. I came across an analogy of the Twin Towers, and if you could visualize cast iron stoves stacked one on top of each other. The stoves up at the top, yes, there's fire and they've been damaged, but the stoves on the bottom, they haven't been damaged. So the structure underneath all of that is intact. So it's impossible for a building to collapse near free fall speed and in.
Let me interject real quick. This is what you call critical thinking. And this is what your average American don't do. That's why when they can't critical think, they call it a conspiracy theory, because they mind too slow to think for themselves. So that's why when they hear anything that's outside the norm of what they've been told in the media, they consider it as crazy talk or conspiracy theory. We just laying facts out. People go into facts and critical think to know this devil is full of S, you know what I'm saying? And he cannot be trusted. You know, going back into never trust thy enemy.
Increase without a controlled demolition. You're running into the path of most resistance. Something else is going on. I don't believe that it was just the planes or the fires. I think that, and they examined the dust and they found what they call fermitic material, which is like an explosive incendiary, which was in the dust samples, and that's documented. There were reports of the buildings were undergoing an extensive elevator renovation in the 2 or 3 years prior to. All kinds of workers, they had access to the cores of the building. And on the day of the attack, the elevator company would not assist in the operations of the elevators. And the elevator company, it subsequently went out of business. And a couple of years after that, the information is out there. At one time when I was heavily engaged in trying to get a new one.
There's a lot of other inconsistencies and lies that they was taught. That'll be a whole nother lesson going into all that information to break all that down, because it's like, that'll be like 4 or 5 part lesson to go into all the lies, the inconsistencies, and the things they slipped on that, you know, people caught that was critically thinking about this, that was putting all the information together. Didn't know they was lying. And I think this thing is gonna cut off because I'm running out of memory. So just keep going.
Investigation, I definitely felt threatened. I felt threatened for my family, and it wasn't a pleasant experience. You have sworn testimonies from firefighters regarding explosions in the building. They were suppressed. Just somebody making a statement, especially from firemen and police, if they make a statement.
Matter of fact, before this thing shut down on me, I'm gonna go to Luke 8:17. Many lessons I got to do, going into many different things. Let me get this real quick before this thing shut off. This is the book of Luke 8:17. For nothing is secret that shall not be made manifest, neither anything hid that should not be known and come abroad. So the people that got their eyes open, so to speak, they're going to see these inconsistencies. They're going to see the truth, and they're going to be able to observe the lies don't make sense. The lie, once you tell a lie, you got to tell another lie and another lie, and that's how they slip. And we see holes in these stories, and that's how we're able to expose it, because the truth don't change. The truth is going to be consistent. When you lie, it's inconsistencies. It's all over the place. They make mistakes. When you lie, you make mistakes. And these devils got really sloppy on this one. Again, there's so many things I could point out to you. And it's not a conspiracy theory. These are facts that this whole thing was set up. Tiny Tops, go back into them. And you work your way down that list of, you know, what went down. But again, going back into what you was taught about the oil supply, there's plenty of oil, you know, everywhere, you know. And also this 911 narrative that you were sold it's all lies, it's all propaganda. And again, I'll have to do a lesson to break all this down right here. They might actually shut down my channel for going into this 9/11 thing. And hopefully this lesson was edifying. Call Allah Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahushua, Bahashim, Rakat, Kodesh, Shalom.